Shadow the Hedgehog, and I made a promise that I intend to keep. With the power of these emeralds, Black Doom and his army are finished. This is who I am.
Shadow the Hedgehog is a character that the fan base has been extremely split on over the last couple of years. It's no secret that ever since Sonic Colors released back in 2010, there's been a complete tonal shift for the entire franchise. And you know what? It was much deserved and well needed. For all the nitpicks people have about the meta era of Sonic, it was a necessary evil in order to keep the franchise afloat, because it got back to the basics for Sonic and really put out a bunch of high quality games, at least in the beginning of this era. And one of the big changes that this era brought was a complete 180 in the characterization for Shadow the Hedgehog. A lot of people at this point in the franchise did not like the way he was portrayed. Despite a lot of good things coming out of this era, a lot of extremely poor business decisions by Sega, like Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric, and the whole soft reboot, caused Sega to once again in 2020 hit the reset button after Sonic Forces, and the Sonic movies helped propel Sonic back into prominence. The series was once again heading for a tonal shift, out with the old writer for the games, and now we're in a new era with new writers for the franchise like Ian Flynn, who was a longtime writer of the Sonic Archie comics. Sonic Frontiers was largely viewed as a big success for the franchise, and this is evidence of the tonal shift that once again was taking place. Fast forward to 2024, it is now the fearless year of Shadow. Shadow the Hedgehog is now brought back into the forefront after being what many believe to be a character that has missed his potential, has been mischaracterized, and written poorly for the better half of over a decade. Especially with Sonic Movie 3 on the horizon, it is very important that they get Shadow right, because at this point, we have a new Shadow. We have a new direction for the character, new direction for the franchise, period. So like I said before, there's this idea circulating within the fan base that Shadow the Hedgehog has been seriously mischaracterized and misrepresented over the years, but now, once again, the spotlight is on Shadow this year with the refocused marketing campaign, especially with Sonic and Shadow Generations right around the corner. We're gonna get something like a do-over for Shadow, right? We're gonna get a deep dive back into his past and maybe give him a chance to be considered cool again. It seems like recently his character has just been overly edgy, anti-Sonic. His sole purpose for existence seems to be, okay, just oppose Sonic, just be grumpy, be miserable, and you see a lot of that characterization throughout the meta era, as well as the writing, voice direction, and everything like that. According to people on the Sonic Lore Council, like Ian Flynn, who goes on his podcast and kind of relays the messages from Sega, it's not all him. Like, let's not blame this one guy for this type of direction. It's obviously coming from the higher-ups, but they say stuff like Shadow the Hedgehog doesn't even claim Team Dark. Like, he's not even friends with them. If you play games like Sonic Heroes and Sonic 06, like, that idea just sounds ludicrous to, like, early 2000s Sonic fans. So now we have our second shot with Shadow, and everyone wants to know, how is he going to be handled in this game? Why is Shadow the Hedgehog quote-unquote lame now? Well, we got an answer for you guys from Sega, from the writers themselves. So now everything post-2022, post-Sonic Frontiers, with new writers is going to have a lot of eyes on it. Every single project that releases featuring Shadow, or basically any canon characterization that's displayed, is going to be under a heavy microscope for Shadow. There's two major events I'd like to highlight, and I'd like to dissect. We have the recent Tales Tube episode, which has been under heavy scrutiny ever since it was released, that actually shows Sonic and Shadow in it, displays their relationship, and also gives us a glimpse as to how Ian Flynn will write Shadow in a game. I mean, he's been written in IDW, and a lot of people have flaws and issues with that, which we can get into. This is kind of like our first time hearing him, like, fully voice acted and written by Ian Flynn. To keep a long story short, here's what one side of the fence is saying. This person says, I was just told that on the recent Tales Tube, Shadow's personality is the current direction for him. Oh man, this is terrible, because now we have Shadow Generations. I'm so tired of this. Shadow Generations is already doomed. This person says, we're never getting the real Shadow back, are we? All right, this one's pretty funny. It says, Shadow is slowly morphing into the Sonic equivalent of Wario. Oh my god. For the love of God, please stop writing him as Vegeta. And that's what actually a lot of people compare Shadow the Hedgehog to, especially with his current direction. So that's kind of one of the general vibes of the fan base. Listen, if you like Shadow's current direction, that's okay, more power to you, but I just want to present all the information that's available. So here's what Ian Flynn actually said on his podcast. Let's roll the clip.
Tales Tube. Is that still Shadow's direction? Or more of a comedic exaggeration a la the Twitter takeover? I loved him in Murder Of and was hoping that would rub off on him in the future.
That is very much his current direction.
Oh boy.
That is after lots of notes and revisions.
As you can see, that's what Ian Flynn had to say about the current direction of Shadow. So if you don't like what was displayed in the Tales Tube, Keep in mind, that's the direction that Shadow's going to have going forward, at least in the game universe. And you'll notice what Ian Flynn said after several revisions and several notes. So clearly this is a mandate from the higher ups. Do not go and get angry at Ian Flynn personally if you don't like the change. But that's just the reality of the situation when it comes to Shadow's characterization. So now that you had the context, you had the backstory about Shadow's characterization, I would like to highlight some certain things about this discussion. First and foremost, I'd like to start off with the Tails tube, which is kind of the center of all this discussion. In the Tails tube, it seems like Shadow is characterized as just like extremely over edgy. For no reason, he's just completely at odds with Sonic, and he seems overly antagonistic towards Sonic for no reason. For example,
I don't know, buddy. We never really got along.
From the moment we met, we've been at odds. We're polar opposites.
I don't know. I think my magnetic personality is quite attractive.
And yet when you're near me, I feel repulsed.
Friendship achieved.
Friendship? If he gets in my way, I'll crush him like any other.
well, Sonic and Shadow, you know, they have been at odds, especially in like some of the games over the years. Usually the circumstances in the game account for that. It's not like Shadow is coming at Sonic for no reason. It's typically because their goals may not align at the current moment. So when you see Shadow unprovoked, basically for no reason at all, saying he's repulsed by Sonic, it just does feel a little bit out of character, and it just feels like it's a different version of Shadow. I also think that the voice acting also oversells this a lot. I'm not the best at putting these kind of things into words. I think I'm better at showing. So why don't we listen to some voice clips of when I think Shadow the Hedgehog was at his best? Just a couple of examples.
I might as well go look for that Master Emerald, since that irritating Echidna is here.
Something's never changed.
What are you saying?
Sonic, I think I've discovered what the ultimate life form is. It might be you.
I'm Shadow the Hedgehog, the one and only ultimate life form. Thanks to Amy, I was able to remember Maria's wish. When I finally realized it, the ultimate life prototype tried to stop me. I'll take care of this, Sonic. You go try to stop the power of the Chaos Emeralds.
So these are voice clips of what made Shadow rise to becoming the second most popular character in the franchise. I wouldn't imagine that some of the newer stuff has created some of those more iconic moments for Shadow. Now, there's time for that to return in the new Sonic and Shadow Generations game, and we're getting a second crack at this being an opportunity. I'm very optimistic that it could be a reality. However, some fans are definitely skeptical, but when you listen to those voice clips of Shadow, he just sounds effortlessly cool. There's no forced rasp in his voice. There's no edge. You can tell that sometimes he can crack some humor, sometimes he has a charming sense of confidence, there's emotion and empathy, and it doesn't sound like a raspy old man. For the record, I'm also a big Jason Griffith fan as well, although I think David Humphrey truly plays the role perfectly. Jason Griffith is like right behind him. It's just as good, almost. Now, let's compare it to his current voice.
Oculus, this new reality holds deeper secrets, and I intend to find them.
Fine, disappear then. Fred's doing a better job than you anyway.
Don't know what Billund has more of. Creativity or cows. Hold for laughs and or applause. I hope you brought your helmets, kids, because my bike only has one gear. Adventure, with its turbocharged brakes and sleekly designed chassis.
Shadow.
Saving the world? You? Don't make me laugh. You're weak. And you know what makes you weak? Your loyalty to your pathetic friends. You're not going through that portal. I'm gonna show you just how weak you are.
Aside from writing and characterization, the acting has something to do with this as well. Now, this is just my personal opinion, and if you like this version of Shadow, that is okay. But a lot of it kind of portrays like what people's feelings are of Shadow. I mean, you think about like the IDW Metal Virus saga, where Shadow isn't smart enough and he just decides to fight the Zombots knowing that it's a losing battle. A lot of people didn't like that characterization in IDW. There's just been a lot of things over the years that fans do not like about Shadow. Which also brings us into the new character bio for Shadow, which I also believe has some flaws in it as well. Because personally, I am kind of on the side of Shadow just not being the same Shadow. It feels like the Shadow that we currently have right now. Feels like a parody of Shadow or a Shadow skin suit. It's not the real Shadow the Hedgehog that we all know and love. In particular, games like SA2, games like Sonic 06, I feel like that is the true Shadow. Here is the current bio for Shadow the Hedgehog. It says, Shadow is known as the ultimate life form. Okay, that sounds good. He was created by Professor Gerald Robotnik, Dr. Eggman's grandfather, grandfather as part of a complex conspiracy involving the military and some ravenous aliens. Shadow has incredible speed, ferocious strength, and a rare ability called Chaos Control. By utilizing the power of a Chaos Emerald, he can stop time and appear to warp around in a new position instantaneously. Shadow is always on the prowl for dangers to the world. While he has no love for it or its people, they were cherished by his once friend, the late Maria Robotnik, Dr. Eggman's cousin. Willing to do anything, willing to fight anyone to ensure no one threatens the world that Maria cherished. This, in my opinion, seems to be the first mistake that they're making with the characterization of Shadow. Keep in mind that bio is in line with the current direction. While yes, in SA2, Shadow the Hedgehog tries to destroy the world, that was only because his memories were tampered and manipulated with, and he wanted to get revenge on his friend Maria, who he cared dearly for. You'll see an example of Shadow caring for others in the cutscene in SA2 where he has to save Rouge. He was reminded of the fact that he was not able to save Maria during the situation, so he tries to right his wrong by saving Rouge. I mean, this is someone who clearly cares about other people. In addition to the fact that he really cared for his dear friend Maria, Shadow shows empathy and emotion when he has to team up with Sonic to save the world, where Amy Rose was actually able to convince him of this, which even causes Edgy the Hedgy, Mr. I don't care about anything in the world, Shadow the Hedgehog, to shed a tear. But yes, we all know that Shadow the Hedgehog was supposed to die at the end of SA2. He falls to Earth and gets amnesia. And what is the first thing Shadow the Hedgehog does, you know, Mr. Amnesia, Shadow the Hedgehog does when he's freed from his little prison? He goes and immediately saves Rouge the Bat without question. This is the first thing he does after his amnesia. So this once again doesn't really seem accurate with the idea that he doesn't care for people in the world. Even in Sonic Battle, which is also canon, which has a pretty decent characterized Shadow, he even questions what he is in this game. He says, we were created as weapons, so why do we have hearts? Why do we have souls? And Rouge hacked Gerald Robotnik's computer and learned about the origins of Shadow. And Shadow asked, why did Gerald give me a soul? She said he was not interested in researching weapons. He was researching a way to bring happiness and hope to all people. She also said that his soul was identical to the beloved Maria. Rouge said, Shadow, you're afraid of your own power and it troubles you, but you've never used your power recklessly, and you've never used it selfishly, and Gerald's wishes have come true. And she told Emerl that you are a weapon and yet you feel sympathy for living beings. However, Gerald did not create you, and he was unable to completely erase the destructive powers within you. That part of you still exists. So he programmed you with a special code, and if the keywords to that code were to be activated, Gerald's program would be complete and you'd be just like Shadow. So what Rouge was saying, if you pay attention very closely, is that Emerl, just like Shadow, was created with sympathy for living human beings. So that right there kind of disproves the narrative that Shadow does not care for people on Earth. Even in Sonic 06, Shadow is working as a gun agent. The one agency that he sought to destroy because they took everything from him, he has now put his past aside after Shadow 05 and is working with them. I think in this game, this is one of my favorite versions of Shadow because he's not overly edgy. He's calm, cool, collected, and tries to once again save the day. Another example of when we see Shadow showing that he cares is the scene in the future of Sonic 06 where E123 Omega is dead, and you can see Shadow is visibly upset with this. Maybe he doesn't outwardly come out with it. There's no doubt that he's bothered by it. Or in IDW issue number 34 where Shadow finds a bunch of Chow locked up, he calls the guy utter scum. Like, this guy does care. Even one of the most iconic scenes in Sonic 06 truly demonstrates that characterization for Shadow.
Why fight at all? Why risk your life for those who will persecute you later?
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
It's scenes like this that demonstrate why Shadow was the second most popular character in the franchise. And the notion that he doesn't care for anyone in the world just doesn't seem fully accurate. But also the other elephant in the room is now they claim that Shadow and Team Dark were never friends. Knowing all the things that they went through together in games like Sonic Heroes and Sonic 06, or even scenes like this.
Shadow, even if you believe everyone in the world will be against you, know that I'll always remain by your side. Remember that.
I will.
The idea that Team Dark is just merely associates does not sit right with me, and once again we also see just how effortlessly cool Shadow was. I could never picture the current Shadow having a scene like that. So given that this is the current direction that Sega wants to go for Shadow, you can see why some people in the fan base are a little bit upset by this, but I'm still gonna wait for the game to come out, and I think that they're gonna do some good things with it, hopefully. It also hasn't been all bad with Shadow. For what it's worth, like, I don't think he's bad in Sonic Forces. Somehow, some way, he's really good in Sonic Prime. Like, he gets angry and he's at odds with Sonic, but it's because Sonic is completely stupid in this show and causes all of that. If we can get this version of Shadow in the games, like, I'm very cool with that. So let me know what you guys think about the current direction of Shadow. Is he lame or is he not?